We're going to give it a minute here to get started so we can let folks get in. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the local government coordination call. This is our 90th call, and this call was originally started as a way to provide critical updates and information regarding COVID-19 response and recovery, and has since shifted. This is still an opportunity to receive important and timely updates from DOLA and other state agencies. Today, we're going to begin with some updates by the Department of Local Affairs, and this will be followed by updates from the Governor's Office of Economic Recovery, as well as an update from the Colorado Department of Agriculture. Let me kick it off by announcing that Chantal Funks will be departing her position as Director of the Division of Local Government. And so please join me in thanking her for her over 10 years of service. Chantal, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Just really quickly, I started my career in DOLA with the 2013 floods, and it seems like a good bookend to be ending on this call, really as we are shepherding all the information and the dollars for the COVID response. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of you on the call for sticking with us as we worked through this process during COVID with all of you. And it has been an honor to work with all of you over the years, and we wouldn't be doing our jobs if you weren't doing yours. So keep up the good work and stay in touch. Thanks, Maria. Back to you.
Thank you, Chantal. And Dave, Chantal's Dave Bowman, Chantal's deputy, will serve as our interim director while we find her replacement. So if you need anything after Chantal's departure, feel free to contact him. So starting with the State Demographer's Office, the State Demographer's Office has published a written summary of the 2022 population and economic trends and forecasts for Colorado. It is on their website homepage. A summary story map will be released in the next month, as well with interactive features to understand trends in the state. The SDO is in the process of updating household forecasts by 4 household types by the year out through 2050 by county. So these should be released online by the end of February. Now on to the Division of Housing, the new Temporary Rental Assistance Grant, or TRAG, which will provide $30 million in temporary rental assistance to Coloradans at risk of eviction or displacement, or who meet income limits and other qualifying factors, launched on Thursday, February 15th. Pre-applications closed yesterday, and after this period, now that pre-applications have been pre-submitted, the Department of Local Affairs will administer a randomized selection to distribute funds to applicants. To learn more about the eligibility requirements and how to submit a pre-application, you can go to the Colorado Temporary Rental Assistance Grant page. On every 15th of the month, while these funds are available, we're thinking through May, folks will be able to pre-apply for these funds. New passbook rate. For the first time in several years, owners and managers of projects in receipt of grant gap funding from DOH's Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability will need to update their software and certification procedures to reflect the housing and urban development's new passbook rate. HUD published an adjusted passbook savings rate of 0.40% effective January 1st, 2024. The new passbook rate is now required for use with any DOH assisted unit. DOH is not requiring the new rate to be applied retroactively. However, it should be used with all future recertifications in new move-ins. Contact Allison Kilgore with any questions. The Division of Local Government, Energy and Mineral Impact Funding, also known as EIAF, opens soon on March 1st. In addition to the regular EIAF funding, there are 3 set-aside opportunities, including the Climate Resiliency Challenge, the More Housing Now, and the Land Use Initiative, and Main Street Livability Investments for Vibrant Economies, Main Street Live. See the EIAF website for more information. Strong Communities Planning grant applications are due March 1st at 5 o'clock. Grants of up to $200,000 can help your community adopt new strategies to support affordable housing and sustainable development partners. Favorable match requirements of 10%. Visit the Strong Communities website to learn more. The next round of rural economic development funding opened on February 14th and will close on March 14th. So for more information on this grant that supports innovative projects that promote economic resiliency in Colorado, a link is provided on the chat. When it comes to other updates, following our updates today, we have our Pathways to Recovery and Resiliency Funding webinar that will be introduced by Shell Sabo from the Colorado Resiliency Office. Our topic today is federal grant monitoring and compliance. And with that, I will turn it over to Elisa Dinberg to provide updates from the Governor's Office of Economic Recovery.
Thanks, Maria. Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a great Wednesday. I don't have a ton of updates today. I just wanted to remind you all that the local match program is open. We still have funding available for you. This program is intended to support local governments in your federal match requirement in your IIJA application. So if you are planning on going after an IIJA program and you are in need of match, please reach out to us. Snow Staples in the Department of Local Affairs actually manages that program. And so if you have questions, she can definitely be available to help you. So we do have money, but money is running out. So make sure you get those applications in. And then the second update is we do still have funding available to support grant writing and technical assistance. So if you are needing some grant writing and technical assistance in your IIJA and or IRA applications, we can support those. So the application is live and we will make sure that that application is linked in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then with that, I will turn it over to Adonai Cuevas of the Colorado Department of Agriculture.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we have a grant open right now for small food retailers. The name of the grant is the Community Food Access Program grant. And this round probably is going to be the last one. It's going to close on March 11th. There's $50,000, the maximum grant award amount for small food retailers like grocery stores, carnicerias, bodegas, corner stores. Those are a great fit for this grant, but also farm stand and farmers market can apply, or small family farms that grow and sell to these kind of small food retail businesses are eligible as well. There are lots of funds that can be used to purchase equipment like walk-in coolers, display cases, point of sales machines, pay for staff, and much more. I'll be dropping the link of the website in the chat. But yeah, it's been a really successful first round so far. We have 42 applications that were successful this time, and we expect to have much more this second round. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adonai. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over for the Pathways to Recovery and Resiliency Funding webinar series. Today, we're going to focus on federal grant funding. And so I will turn it over to the team.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. 1 second as I get our presentation pulled up here. So yes, we are focusing on compliance and grant monitoring, or excuse me, compliance and monitoring for federal grant funding today. And we have some great speakers. We have Gail Hoagland from the state of Colorado. And then we also have Ryan Klobuchar from the EPA, who's going to speak to EPA programs, but also federal programs in general. So I will go ahead and share my screen once more. And then Gail, I will kick it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. So thank you very much for the invite. So I am with the Office of State Controller for Colorado, and I am a compliance liaison focused primarily on state and local fiscal recovery funds, which if any of you have had the pleasure of dealing with SLFRF, you know there's a lot of requirements for compliance and monitoring. So we will kind of go through a very high level of those two topics as it relates to federal funding as well as state funding. So, some helpful hints to you in how to be compliant with your funding that you receive. First off, read the NOFA or NOFO, depending upon which federal agency it is. It's called something different, or the RFA if it is state funds. And in addition, your notice of award. Both of those can give you really detailed, good information around the rules, guidelines, any specific directions that may be involved with the funding, and including eligibility, including reporting, everything you need to know, basically, in how to manage the funding will be contained in those two significant notices. It's important as you read through them that you use that information to be able to set up your systems and processes to be able to follow the requirements. For instance, if you are required to report on a quarterly basis, then, go ahead and set up your processes for how you're going to gather that information in a timely way to be able to get your reports in on time. It's also important to take a look at your written policies and procedures that you probably already have in place, but it's a good time to look at them and update them if you need to, specifically around any new requirements that you may have to be able to comply with federal or state funding. That way, you can stay on top of things. You already have your policies and procedures in place, and you're a step ahead of the game. So start early, but continue it throughout. Fiscally, you want to be sure to set up a separate cost center for the funds, because regardless of the funding source, you need to be able to track those funds totally separate from any other funds unless you are intentionally blending or braiding the funds. So, you also need to be aware of fiscal requirements related to 2 CFR 200 and or the state. So that includes, can you sole source procurements? What kind of competition requirements do you need to follow? And what is the dollar threshold to decide which form of procurement you need to follow? Make sure you take into consideration all of those things if you are going to be passing along any funding that you receive out of that funding award. You also need to take into consideration if you are going to have any sub-recipients, because you will also need to pay attention to all of the rules surrounding sub-recipients. One of those rules we'll talk about in just a moment, which relates to monitoring. You need to make sure that your fiscal system is set up to maintain all of your detailed invoices, your payroll, any purchases that you have, any fiscal items related to the grant funds. It's recommended that you keep all of those in a master file so that should you get audited or need to have some proof of how you spent the funds and what you spent them on, it's all right there in one master file. That makes life much easier for everybody. As I mentioned earlier, programmatically, you need to know and follow any eligibility requirements for beneficiaries or services to be provided. I mentioned earlier that, my primary role as a compliance liaison currently is with the state and local fiscal recovery funds. That is a federal funding award that has very detailed eligibility requirements, and details out what services can and cannot be provided through the use of the funding. And if any of you have dealt with it, it can get very complicated. So you really want to make sure you're exceptionally clear that you're following the rules and you're documenting all of that to make sure that you are following the rules, serving those individuals that are eligible, and that your services as a whole fit within the award of the funding. Make sure you track all of your deliverables. You'll need that for reporting, but also it is an excellent thing to be able to share with the broader community. Here's our achievements and our outcomes, and here's the successes that we have had. That is really important to be able to provide that information. And of course, you want to absolutely make sure that you are submitting your reporting on a timely basis. So if you have all of these things, the systems, processes, procedures, what you have to be tracking, that makes life much easier when it is time to submit your reports, because you have already prepared to gather all of that information together. You have it in one location, and then it's just a matter of putting it together and doing the reporting. So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about monitoring. And again, this is very high level that we're talking. So let's start with, if you, as a recipient of federal funds or state funds, are being monitored by the funding agency. What does that look like, and how do you prepare for it? You want to make sure that you have everything related to that funding award on hand. Since you've already updated your policies and procedures to account for the federal or state award, that's fabulous. Have them on hand when you are being monitored. Have your general ledger ready so that you can show your separate, distinct cost center and all of the expenditures related to that cost center. always be sure to show your work. A colleague frequently uses the term that if it's not on paper, or documented somewhere, then you really have no proof. And you need to have proof. So you need to have attendance logs, time and effort of employees. If there are specific eligibility requirements, documentation that you have met those eligibility requirements for those participants, or through your program as a whole, your work plan, etc. Typically, it's important to remember that if you're being monitored, it's not an audit. It's not meant to be punitive or a gotcha process, but really can be helpful to you in showcasing the work that you're doing, but also it's a great time to say, we could really use some technical assistance on this specific thing. And that is really what monitoring is about, to provide you the support that, can be helpful to you to be highly successful. Now, let's talk about if you are, with your award, you have sub-recipients that you are funding. You are absolutely required to monitor your sub-recipients. So what do you need to have in place, and how do you go about that monitoring process? Well, much of what you will be doing is the same as was on the previous slide if you were being monitored. So when you monitor a subrecipient, you really want to look at the administrative, fiscal, program, personnel practices, but doing so through a deeper dive. So show me the documentation on this. Are there time and effort documentation? It's one thing to say, oh, these 10 people all work on the grant, but what if those 10 people are juggling, as many times happens, 5 different roles within your entity? Well, then the time that is spent on each of those 5 different roles should be tracked so that you can have that documentation showing this is the time spent on this federal or state award, and here's how much payroll costs were involved in paying for that time. As I said earlier, you want to make sure that you maintain invoices, all your purchases and costs, etc., in a master file, so that when you are being monitored, you have ready access to any of that documentation that the awarding entity may be asking for. And finally, you'll have an opportunity through the monitoring process to address any shortcomings or any findings via a corrective action plan. And again, that corrective action plan sounds negative, but it really is. Okay, so we didn't have this in place. So here's the steps we're going to take to make sure moving forward that we do have everything in place, ready to go, and we're in total compliance. And then, more importantly, follow up and make sure that across the board, all your T's are crossed, all your I's are dotted, and again, you're ready to showcase the wonderful work you're doing in your community. So I didn't provide any specific links for any resources, but I think you will get some links in the next section. So in general, how do you find those resources? Well, check the funding agency for additional program requirements and guidance. Most federal agencies do offer training. Take advantage of it because it will help you in running your program. You know, state agencies also provide specific guidance. Make sure you are checking that out. And really, you want to take advantage of anything and everything that you can that's being offered, because it will ultimately make your life much easier. So look at the program and training resources, any reporting guidance that the entity, the awarding entity, is providing to you. And certainly, you want to make sure that your state or federal program managers are your best friends, because they are going to be the best source of information. They are the people to turn to if you have questions, or we're struggling with this. What do you suggest we do? How should we handle it? So really get to know your program managers and never be afraid to reach out and ask for help. And with that, I just want to say thank you, not only for your time and listening here today, but I really want to do a sincere thank you for all the wonderful work that you are doing in communities across the state. So, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that, Gail. I really appreciated that, and I learned a little something myself. So thank you for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Kloberdance. I'm a senior grant specialist with the Environmental Protection Agency. I'm based here in Denver in our Region 8 office, and I am thrilled to be talking with you today. And so thank you so much for the opportunity. So first thing I'll do is just kind of go over an overview of what we're going to be covering today. And so I should just mention off the bat, the first thing is I did not put this presentation together. I'm actually filling in for a colleague. And if that sounds like I'm making an excuse for if this presentation stinks, I don't want the blame. That's exactly what I'm doing. But just in case there's any incongruity with what I'm saying, what I'm talking about, and what you're seeing on the slideshow, we can definitely clear that up at the end during the Q&A session. So I just wanted to kind of make sure you heard that, knowing that there might, if you hear anything that makes you go, huh, or want a question, please, we can absolutely talk through it during the Q&A session. So today I'm going to be talking to you about just monitoring and compliance after you've received an EPA assistance agreement, which is how we talk about grants. We call them assistance agreements. Some of the information that I'll be sharing is relevant to the other federal grants you might have or might be interested in applying for. But just always want to say that please ensure if you're applying for or and receive an award from another federal agency that you follow their post-award information and guidance, because it does deviate across agencies. So the preview of what I'll be covering today, just kind of our high-level overview. We'll go through the federal regulations and EPA policy guidance. We'll highlight some EPA terms and conditions. We'll talk about reporting requirements. We'll go over recipient responsibilities. We'll discuss types of monitoring that EPA does after grants are awarded. And we'll kind of cover some common audit findings and what EPA auditors look for in regards to fraud, waste, and abuse. Finally, I'll talk about some technical assistance that EPA has for local governments to help them prepare for federal grants. So on our next slide, I really liked what Gail was saying in her presentation about gotcha. I know sometimes it can be so exciting to receive a federal award. It can be gratifying. It can make an impact in the community, but there's also the paperwork, the bureaucracy that comes with it that sometimes feels a little gotcha. So I always like to start off every presentation with just the regulations, the federal laws that guide us at EPA. So the first is 2 CFR Part 200. That's the uniform grant requirements relevant to all federal grant recipients. Then there's 2 CFR Part 1500, which is specific to EPA grants. This is the cost principles and allowable costs, the audit requirements, and the grant administration requirements, including procurement standards and record keeping that guide EPA project officers and grant specialists. There's also 40 CFR Part 33, which is specific to our disadvantaged business enterprise requirements. And finally, just at the bottom, you'll see a link to the EPA policy and guidance, which may be relevant to specific grants you receive. And so you can just see those are all hyperlinked to the regulations. If you would like to see them, get familiar with them, I think I include them. Just as Gail was saying, it's not about gotcha. This is kind of what Congress gives us and what our headquarters gives us is our guiding light for monitoring assistant agreements and making them as most successful as possible. And so this is kind of, anytime you're hearing from us or we're asking about something, it's coming right from here. So going on to just the general terms and conditions are attached to all EPA assistant agreements, and they're updated about once a year. And it's truly when we send out a new assistance amendment, it's the first thing I ask recipients to read, because the terms and conditions cover everything that you need to have a successful grant project. And that's the proper drawdown requirements to actually, receive the money, the post-award reporting, so the reporting you do about the award that you have been granted, requirements on indirect costs, information about audits, information about how to extend an EPA grant or make an amendment if you need to change something about the grant. It also, like we said, goes over the disadvantaged business enterprise requirements, highlights some additional requirements we have in regard to equipment, Build America, Buy America, and it covers the fraud, waste, and abuse and some whistleblower protections that you have when dealing with federal agencies and grants. And again, I'll just say, when you get an EPA grant, this is the first thing that we ask you to look over. The first thing we're happy to hop on the phone with you once you receive your grant about, just if you have any questions about those. And you can see there's a link on the slideshow because that's kind of our guiding light. It is the main terms and conditions that we use on every single grant we award. So on this second slide, this next slide deals with just the reporting and the requirements around reporting for EPA grants. And the first is the federal financial reports, which is just a summation of the drawdowns that are due annually every year and at the end of the grant period. There's DBE reports for, and these are things you must complete if the combined total for supplies, equipment, and services exceed $250,000 in your assistance amendments. And this also includes funds for subawards and loans. And then the programmatic report. So when you get an EPA grant, you deal with both the project officer who runs the the project of the grant, and then us in the EPA grants office. And so to the programmatic office, you send in your annual technical reports, and then any other reports that they specify in the programmatic terms and conditions of the award. So the next slide highlights your responsibility when administering EPA grants. And the first thing we ask is for you to plan ahead, which I think Gail kind of highlighted in her presentation as well. And that is ensuring that your policies and procedures / your kind of internal controls are in place so that you can adhere to all of the grant regulations. And that's really reading through and understanding the grant agreement and the terms and conditions that you need to adhere to. We ask that you're prepared to administer the assistance agreement. You're agreeing to comply with the laws, regulations, policies, and terms and conditions of the award. And then, as part of that, that you're maintaining the financial and programmatic records that we asked for in the terms and conditions. And then finally, the expectations around reporting. That is, you're drawing down funds in a timely manner, which we can work with you on if you ever have questions on that, that you're submitting required reports, and that you're notifying the EPA if any changes occur, issues arise. One thing that my office does is run a pretty robust amendment program with grants, and that can be anything from an extension to rebudgeting to adding in a different term and condition to make administering the grant easier. So we talk about the planning, the reporting, the administration of the assistance agreements. But I always say the good news is that as long as we're in communication, we can make sure that these work for you and your local community and getting the grant to perform the best as possible. It is just making sure that you're planning ahead, you're being prepared to administer it, and then you're meeting your reporting expectation. And that's kind of what empowers us to tailor any grant to, or at least talk about tailoring grants to your specific requirements or things you're noticing midway through the grant. So in slide 8, this is kind of our the post-award monitoring that you may experience with federally funded assistance agreements. So let's see here what Lindsay had. Single audits are required for any non-federal entity that expends more than $750,000 more in a fiscal year for grants, or so I'm sorry, this is a little bit off. Give me 1 second here. So any recipient that's spending more than $750,000 in a federal financial assistance agreement has to fill out a single audit form and work with the single audit program. You can see a little bit more of that in 2 CFR Part 200 Subpart F. For the bulk of our office, we focus on post-award monitoring, which often is randomly selected reviews. And this kind of goes to what Gail was talking about. These are usually a request from a grant specialist that comes in the form of asking for receipts that match your drawdowns, receipts that match your spending. Sometimes these are on-site desk reviews where we send one of our grant specialists down there. Sometimes they're just done via Zoom or via the phone. But when this happens, this is, there's a whole process about getting notifications, about getting time that you're able to get all your information together, about what you'll need to submit and what we're looking for. I've found the process, which again sometimes feels a little punitive or extra bureaucratic, actually can be really helpful in empowering groups to succeed with federal grants. So that is some of the monitoring that we do. I guess I would say we select about 13 grants for post-award monitoring out of hundreds of grants we do. So it's certainly not something that affects everybody or most everybody, but it's something that we talk about when we're awarding grants, that it's a possibility. some of the common audit findings we have from our monitoring program is that we sometimes see that there's a lack of internal controls over drawdowns for expenditures, that we're finding unallowable activities and expenditures that aren't part of the prearranged project plan in the grant. We sometimes find failure to manage and maintain equipment, procurement issues, payroll, travel, and contracting issues, sometimes subaward monitoring issues, or missing support for cost share and matching. A lot of these can be fixed with additional monitoring, an amendment, or just weekly, monthly, maybe quarterly meetings with your EPA team to help. It can honestly help get a grant back on track, and I've seen that happen many times. So in slide 10, we have I think one more, please. Oh, thank you. This slide provides just an overview of the fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement and what EPA auditors look for. This is, I think most everyone who gets an EPA or a federal grant gets a little bit of training on this. There are webinars available, but it's what auditors are looking for: intentional deception to, deprive the government of something of value for individual benefit, for fraud. The waste is the extravagant, careless, or needless expenditure of government funds that result from a lack of practice, systems, controls, or design. There's the abuse, which is the misuse of one's position with grant money, and mismanagement, failure to appropriately manage budgets, expenditures, or documentation from grant funds. And then let's see, what did she throw in here? So post-award compliance and monitoring, you will see that that at epa.gov.grants, and this is where we keep all of our information, all of our post-award training, additional information on policy and guidance. There are a ton of good resources on epa.gov/grants, and lots of trainings that try and just break down each step of the process so that you know your role, your responsibilities, your rights as a recipient. I find them to be broken down a lot of times into just kind of clever webinars that aren't too long, that aren't too onerous, that just kind of give you a good overview of what you need. And I find myself linking to this and linking to specific training all the time. And so I encourage you, if you have an EPA grant or you're interested in EPA grant, to head to epa.gov/grants, and you'll be able to find a lot of great resources on that site. And then there's one final resource I wanted to highlight, and that is what we call the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. It's at EPA, we call it the TICTAC, the EJ TICTAC. So I'll just call it here now. And that the EJ TICTAC serves as a resource for communities to identify, access, and deploy resources in local communities. Our current EJ TICTAC serves Region 8 states, and we're using the International City County Management Association to help with our EJ TICTAC. And ICMA's goal is to build capacity of communities to navigate the federal grant application systems, write strong grant proposals, and effectively manage their grant funding. If you see that more information link, you can actually request assistance from the ICMA, who kind of serves as a resource for you to just navigate the entire federal grant process. And I would encourage you, even if you're just not sure of what you need, or if you're doing something right, they are really helpful, and they have really helped communities receive grants and successfully administer them in their community. So I will just encourage you to hit that link as well. If you have any questions about today, we can talk about it during the Q&A, but if something comes along in your head and you'd like to email me, my email is right there, and please do not hesitate to reach out. So just kind of like what Gail said, thank you for all you do. We see such incredible grant management and work done on behalf, with the EPA grants in local communities. It's really inspiring to see. It's certainly gratifying on our end to see the difference it can make. And so thank you so much for having me. And if you have any questions, I'll be around through the Q&A. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Gail and Ryan, for your extremely informative presentations. I do want to open this up now. If anyone has any questions that they would like to ask either one of our speakers, you are welcome to use the chat or the Q&A feature. We did have a question earlier, not related to the presentations, but I just want to make sure everyone got the opportunity to hear. So it was a question in regards to our Energy and Interim Assistance Fund. So it says, how are local governments being included in the discussion of EIF set-aside programs? For example, what is needed and prioritized versus the important uses of the funds outside of the special set-asides? And so Chantal provided a really great answer. Historically, the department watches revenue, project pipelines, and statewide trends we hear about from local governments to the regional manager and state officials to decide if an initiative is warranted. For example, local governments across the state were asking us, excuse me, to support rural broadband on a larger scale than one-off project. By launching a set-aside, we're allowing local governments to apply in the same cycle for more than one project so they don't have to compete with themselves. Affordability, strategic growth, and economic development, downtown barriers have been priority topics, and we hope to support local governments accordingly. So I'm not seeing a question. Oh, here we go. So it says, can we get the link for the agriculture related grant that was briefly brought up? Yes, I will put that back in the chat. And then a question I have for either Gail or Ryan, whoever feels, I mean, I guess if both of you want to answer as well. But a lot of folks are probably applying for federal grants for the first time ever, especially in rural parts of our state. You've provided a really great overview of where to start and some kind of best practices to know of, but are there any additional resources or tips or tricks for folks who might be applying for the very first time for federal programs that anyone should know about or that you would like to mention in today's call?
Yeah, I'm going to just, if it's okay, just talk about the TICTAC one more time. And I just put the specific link in the chat. So essentially, federal policy often bars us from being too specific when we talk with potential applicants about the grant. The most that I think 200 CFR allows me to say is that the most important thing you can do is read that request for assistance, or what we used to call the request for proposal, and be very specific in answering the questions. That adding other things that doesn't quite in your applications that doesn't quite relate to the RFP, it doesn't get you any points. That EPA and all federal agencies are looking specifically at how you address the questions in the RFA. So because of the federal agency can't kind of can't give you any tips or tricks in terms of in terms of applications, but there is obviously a ton of questions about it. That is why we essentially pay for ICMA to be your neutral arbiter and your technical assistance in the support that you can get for applying for EPA grants. So if you click on that link, you'll see a huge request technical assistance button. And when you click that, you can go straight to them, chat with them about what programs you're interested in, and then they can help you navigate the application process. And that's who we send people to. And I think it can be a really, really helpful tool in the application process.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. Gail, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Ryan really covered it. Other than if you are applying, and Ryan said it, read through the notice very carefully, because most federal agencies have to fully describe what is eligible to be funded, how you'll be scored on your application, the things that you have to include. And so really scour that, get out your highlighter and really highlight everything that you need to pay attention to. And good luck.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I am not seeing any other questions. I do want to remind folks that we will be sharing out all of the slides and the recording of this call on our website. I will link that in the chat here in just a second. Also, make sure that you are registered for this call moving forward. We do use that distribution list to send out reminders of this call, but also any kind of follow-up notes or materials directly to your email. Also, we in that follow-up email, we have a question and answer form. So if there's a question that comes up after today that you think of later on, go ahead and submit it to that form and we'll follow up accordingly. I want to thank Ryan and Gail one more time. Thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge and sharing that with us today. But since I'm not seeing any other questions, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Maria to close out our call.
Thank you so much. Thanks again to all of our presenters today, and please make sure that you make use of this information. And as always, feel free to contact your regional managers if you have any questions. We are here to support you in any way possible. Thank you all so much and have a great day.